Welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. Let's have a really quick history lesson right now, okay? The Civil War was not a war about slavery as a primary basis. There, I said it. Now you can, delete me and stuff. The primary antecedent causes of the Civil War were economic and governmental. It's pretty important right now because we're dealing with a situation where the idea that the mobs, the more populated states, should rule over everyone economically as well as electorally is very popular. Let's see. Stephen Decatur Miller was the first person to talk about the cartridge box, or the boxes of freedom, okay? And let's see. There are only three ways to reform our congressional legislation: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. This is in 1830. At this point in time, the northern states, the more populous states, have set up tariffs to prevent the industrialization and expansion of trade in the southern states. This doesn't actually follow the slave-holding lines. Okay, this has nothing to do with slaves at this point in time. This is actually agricultural versus industrial. This is why the later breakup and dissolution of the Union for the Civil War had some really weird issues, okay? There was some really weird stuff that went on there that doesn't match up with the slavery narrative. This is 1830, okay? I'm doing this because people don't know the history of the cartridge box, It's most famously attributed to Frederick Douglass. He was the famous ex-slave, former slave, who talked about the soapbox, ballot box, jury box, and cartridge box. And in the context, he actually said that he'd already had access to the cartridge box, and now he wanted the jury box and the ballot box. Give me the rest of the rights. And he was fighting northern racism to get those rights. I want you to understand this, okay? One of the big things about the Civil War is that the ending of slavery... Now, Lincoln very famously said that if he could save the Union by ending slavery, he would. If he could save the Union by not ending slavery, he would. Okay? Slavery was not his main thing either. Okay? Granted, he was a president, he had presidential responsibilities and concerns, and that's a different point of view from the average citizen. Slavery was a component. Slavery was absolutely a component, okay? The abolition of slavery was definitely a huge part of what led to the shooting part of the war. And it was used to drum up support so that we could have a shooting part of the war, because most of the North, without the propaganda of the slavery, getting everyone riled up, most of the people in the North would have let the South just go their own merry way because they didn't really think it mattered, okay? We are literally talking about the industrial North with a continent to expand into. This is the 1860s. This is not the 1950s, right? There's no Hollywood, okay? Plenty of land, plenty of expansion. It wasn't a big deal. To get that support, to get people in the North who were already rich, fat, and happy to go fight, you had to do something, and that was slavery. But the economic factors that led to the war go all the way back, okay? Just after the Whiskey Rebellion, actually. So, Stephen Decatur Miller, here in 1830, is talking already about the only avenues available to get the tariffs lifted, okay? Because this had nothing to do with slavery. This point in time had nothing to do with slavery. The North, the industrialized and banking, financialized North, was using tariffs to try to stagnate and abuse the southern agricultural economy. Big deal. Really big deal. Really, really, really big deal, okay? They were creating and enforcing poverty in the South for their own profit. They were creating and enforcing poverty in the South for their own profit. Now, racism in the North was obscene, okay? I mean, all the way up until the 60s, into the 70s and 80s, okay? There are still places in northern cities where if you're black and you go, the white people, they're all liberals. I don't get it, but they really don't like you. They want to, give you money and food and free housing and stuff over there somewhere, right? Racism is more endemic in the North just prior to the Civil War than it is in the South. There are absolutely groups in the South who think that slaves are slaves because of the color of their skin, that God made them that way, okay? But remember that this is only a generation, at most 2 generations, okay? Because leading up to the Civil War, we're dealing with the 1830s, the 1840s, the 1850s. Since Irish slaves, and slaves, not indentured service, Irish slaves outnumbered African slaves in the colonies in the States. It's not that far removed, okay? It's in living memory. So let's be really clear here, okay? Because we're talking about the cartridge box quite a lot lately. We're talking about the 4 boxes of liberty. Realize that comes from attempts by an authoritarian centralized government that is using the myth of democracy, majoritarianism, to restrict, negate, punish other people for their own gain. It's not about the majority wills that we build this. It's about the majority wills that we restrict you, that we take your money, that we take your livelihood. It's a very negative kind of majoritarianism. And it was pretty bad in the 1830s. And it led eventually to a civil war. No matter what the propaganda machine says the Civil War was about, the economic factors, the majoritarianism, making use of the majoritarianism to inflict economic punishment or to profiteer off of other groups, minority groups, was what led directly to the Civil War. Might be something you want to think about right now if you have the freedom of speech left to hear this message and think about it. Stay sideways.